On the morning of December. On the morning of December 4th, 1872, a sailor aboard the ship Dei Gratia spotted something strange on the horizon. A ship, drifting. Its sails were half set. Catching wind, it had no crew to steer, no flags, no signals, no answer to their calls. The captain of the Dei Gratia knew that ship. It was the Mary Celeste, and it had left New York 8 days before them, bound for the same ocean on the same route. What the boarding party found when they climbed aboard has never been fully explained. The Mary Celeste was not a mystery ship by design. She was a modest American brigantine just under 100 feet long, built for cargo, not legend. In November of 1872, she departed New York Harbor under Captain Benjamin Briggs, a respected and experienced sailor from a family of seafarers. With him were his wife, Sarah, their 2-year-old daughter, Sophia, and a crew of 7, all described by those who knew them as capable, sober, and unremarkable. The ship carried 1,700 barrels of denatured alcohol, industrial grade, bound for Genoa, Italy. Briggs had sailed this route before. He knew the Atlantic. He knew his ship. There was no reason to expect trouble, and for over a week there wasn't any sign of it. Then, on December 4th, the Dei Gratia crossed paths with the Mary Celeste roughly 400 miles east of the Azores. Her sails were damaged and improperly set. Her rigging was in disarray, but she was afloat, structurally sound, and drifting with the current, no one at the helm. A boarding party climbed aboard. What did they find? Not chaos, not violence, something stranger. The ship's single lifeboat was gone. That much made sense if the crew had abandoned ship, but almost nothing else did. Briggs's navigation instruments and ship's papers were missing, but a substantial amount of cash and valuables remained untouched in the captain's cabin. Sarah Briggs's sewing machine sat undisturbed, a piece of fabric still in its needle. The crew's oilskins and pipes, personal items no sailor would leave behind willingly, were still in their quarters. Below deck, the cargo hold contained the 1,700 barrels of alcohol. 9 of them were later found empty. The ship's galley showed signs that a meal had recently been prepared. Some accounts describe food still sitting out, as if abandoned mid-task. The last entry in the captain's log was dated November 25th, 9 days before discovery, and it recorded nothing unusual. Fair weather, a routine position near the island of Santa Maria. No warning, no distress, just an ordinary entry, and then silence. 6 months of food and water remained on board. The ship itself, once the wet sails were dried and rigging repaired, was seaworthy enough to sail on to Gibraltar under a skeleton crew. Whatever happened to Benjamin Briggs, his family, and his crew, it happened suddenly, and it happened without leaving behind a struggle. So what could make 10 people abandon a functioning ship in open ocean, taking almost nothing with them? The investigation that followed only deepened the confusion. When the Mary Celeste reached Gibraltar, British authorities launched a formal inquiry, led by the territory's Attorney General, Frederick Solly Flood. Flood suspected foul play from the start. He pointed to a sword found aboard with what he believed were bloodstains and cut marks on the ship's rail that he thought suggested a struggle. He floated theories involving mutiny, drunken violence among the crew, even conspiracy between the 2 captains, since Briggs and the master of the Dei Gratia were known to each other. But the physical evidence did not hold up. The stains on the sword were later found not to be blood. The marks on the rail were consistent with normal wear, not combat. No trace of violence was ever confirmed anywhere on the ship. Flood's theories were largely dismissed, and the crew of the Dei Gratia was eventually cleared of any wrongdoing, though they were awarded only a fraction of the salvage money they had hoped for, a decision some believe reflected the court's lingering suspicion. With foul play largely ruled out, other explanations emerged, and this is where the story of the Mary Celeste splits into competing theories, each with defenders and each with holes. One of the most enduring explanations involves the cargo itself. Denatured alcohol, especially the type carried aboard, could release fumes as barrels shifted and warmed during the voyage. Some historians believe that Briggs, smelling fumes or fearing a possible explosion, made the decision to evacuate everyone into the ship's small lifeboat, intending to wait at a safe distance until the danger passed. If that lifeboat became separated from the ship, perhaps by a sudden storm or a snapped tow line, the Mary Celeste could have simply sailed on without them, leaving her crew stranded in the open Atlantic with no way to catch her. It's a theory that accounts for the calm departure, no panic, no struggle, just a cautious captain making a fatal miscalculation. But it does not fully explain why 9 barrels were found empty, or why no wreckage or trace of the lifeboat and its occupants was ever recovered, despite an ocean full of passing ships along that trade route. Other theories point to the weather. Some researchers have proposed that a sudden, violent storm or a rogue wave may have convinced Briggs the ship was sinking, prompting an evacuation that proved fatally premature. Weather records from the period are incomplete, and no confirmed storm has ever been definitively tied to the ship's location and timeline. It remains a plausible explanation, not a proven one. Then there are the stranger theories, the ones that made the Mary Celeste a household name far beyond maritime circles. Some have suggested a seaquake, an undersea earthquake capable of producing violent, disorienting turbulence, might have convinced the crew the ship was breaking apart. Others, less grounded in evidence, have proposed waterspouts, piracy that left no trace, or even paranormal explanations that gained traction more through fiction than fact. Much of that mythology traces back to a short story published 7 years after the incident, written by a young doctor named Arthur Conan Doyle, years before he created Sherlock Holmes. His fictionalized account embellished the case with invented details. A supposed massacre, a fictional survivor, dramatic flourishes that had nothing to do with the real record. But the story spread, and for over a century, fact and fiction blurred together in the public imagination, turning a genuine unsolved case into something closer to legend. Strip away the fiction, and what remains is still deeply unresolved. No wreckage of a lifeboat, no remains, no confirmed sighting ever of Benjamin Briggs, his wife, his daughter, or any member of his crew before or after December 4th, 1872. 10 people vanished from a ship that showed almost no sign of what took them. Modern maritime historians have revisited the case using what evidence survives, cross-referencing weather patterns, cargo manifests, and the ship's documented history of past mishaps and near disasters under previous owners. Some now favor the alcohol fume theory as the most statistically plausible explanation. Others argue the true cause may never be recoverable, lost along with the lifeboat and everyone in it. What almost all serious researchers agree on is this: whatever happened, it happened quickly and it happened without warning to people who had no reason to expect it. The Mary Celeste herself continued sailing for another 12 years after the incident, changing hands repeatedly, developing a reputation among sailors as an unlucky vessel. She was deliberately wrecked off the coast of Haiti in 1885, in what investigators later determined was an insurance fraud scheme by her final owner, a strange and almost fitting final chapter for a ship whose greatest mystery was never solved, only walked away from. More than a century and a half later, the case remains open in every sense that matters. There was no trial that resolved it, no confession, no wreckage that closed the file. Just a captain's log that stops mid-sentence in its ordinariness, a sewing machine with the thread still in place, and a ship that sailed on without the 10 people who should have been standing on her deck. What made Benjamin Briggs decide, in an instant, to leave the only shelter his family had in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean? We may never know, and that, more than any theory offered in the century and a half since, is what happened next has never been fully explained.